So today we're talking about how to fully feel our emotions. And this was inspired by a class I was in about 3 weeks ago. And it was all about, it's a very interesting class. It's all based in David Bohm's work, who's my favorite quantum physicist, as lots of you guys know. And how our emotions actually allow us to feel the world around us. Right? That when we actually are able to feel our emotions completely, we also are able to feel, what he would have called the hollow flux, this world that is constantly sort of coming in and out of existence, in and out of the quantum field, always changing around us. And when we don't experience our emotions, we feel kind of shut down. And so I meet with this group once a month, and somebody presents something that kind of stirs you inside and allows you to kind of experience the world differently. And a few weeks ago, the man who presented was presenting his story about the grief he felt when his wife died. And it was a really, really emotional thing. And he talked about allowing the grief to really flow through him, that he was allowed to wail, that he was allowed to feel it all. And it really struck me. And he even talked about this one time that he was at home alone and he just fell to his knees and he just opened up his arms and he just felt the emotion. He just felt the grief like flowing through him. And it really, really touched me, and it stays with me to this moment. And I thought, wow, I really want to talk about this more. I want to go deeper into it. Because emotions are such an interesting thing, because on the one hand, it's so healthy to feel emotions. It's so healthy to allow that wave of emotion to flow through us. But because emotions have been so repressed for so long, we often don't have healthy expressions of emotions anymore. So we either repress them and they come out sideways. They come out the wrong way. They come out in ways that are unhealthy for us and for everyone around us. Or we repress them and they're used to be manipulative tools to affect other people. Or we don't repress them and they completely take over our lives, and we have no balance anymore, and our whole life goes amok, and then we're terrified to feel our emotions because we can't go to work and we can't take care of the kids and we don't come out of it and we drop into a brutal depression, or we feel so much anxiety we can't function. So emotions are a really powerful thing, and that we don't really know what to do with them anymore. And then we blend in, well, what if I'm an empath and I'm feeling everyone else's emotions and I have my own emotions and I need to honor them, but I need to go to work. And it's so confusing, right? So what do we do instead? We just sort of go, you know what? I'm just going to bottle it up and I'm going to just set it aside somewhere. But that doesn't work either. And we know that. And so I think talking about how to really feel emotions, how to identify what's a feeling, what's an emotion, what's a mood, what's a prolonged depression, what's anxiety, what are these things, and actually be able to, and I'm going to say this, which sounds funny, how to actually systematically understand them. It'll really help us sort this out, because, and I feel this sounds so funny, because the idea of systematically understanding emotions seems like a paradox. Like it seems counterintuitive. It's like, no, we don't systematize emotions. Emotions are the flowing feminine. They are our true expression of self. They are raw. They are who we are. You don't systematize them. But as I was sitting this morning preparing our talk, what came to me was the incredible balance of the masculine and feminine. that at all times we are meant to be in balance. In balance, not imbalance, in balance. We are meant to be this beautiful yin-yang symbol, that half is this flowing feminine and half is this amazing masculine. And in no way am I talking about gender here. I'm talking about the masculine and feminine, the two polarities that when they come together, we experience oneness, we experience centeredness, we experience bliss, balance, joy. And again, even joy, I don't mean happiness. I mean this exalted state of being that a human being is capable of. And in that oneness, we experience the duality of this masculine, feminine, yin, yang, however we want to understand it. And this flow of the feminine, we only are allowed to experience it when we have an equal masculine supporting it. That's when it all works. And that's why it's interesting to imagine a system of understanding the feminine, because that's the masculine. It's creating the philosophy, the structure to allow for this incredible flow of the feminine. That's when our life, that's when we're allowed to actually experience the passion of this emotion. Happy, sad, grief, trauma, all of it, right? The only way we can actually dive into it is when we have this strong masculine self that understands the context of everything we're experiencing. So this is the structure that I want to talk about emotions in today, is the balance of the masculine and the feminine. So the first kind of emotion I want to talk about is a genuine response to life. A genuine response. For me right now, the truth is, yesterday I found out that a good friend of mine took her life. And I'm actually really wrestling with that. I'm wrestling with how I can't swallow it. It's really, really upsetting. And so I'm actually really wrestling with a lot of grief right now because she was a really good friend and she was really a wonderful person. This is a really natural response to something happening in life. This is a real thing. You know, there's no need to repress it. There's no need to analyze it. There's no need to decide how long it's going to take to overcome it. It's a natural response to life. If something bad happens, if someone does something to you and you get angry, this is a natural response to life. This is an important response to something that is human. This means we're alive right now. If something happens that is so glorious that it makes you so happy, this is also a natural emotional response to life. This is really, really important. You know, I appreciate all your thoughts. But the masculine side of this, the masculine side of these emotions, even, and I know that I sound like I'm maybe being cold about my friend passing, because trust me, I'm not. But there's also some part of a philosophy within me that holds me and says, it's okay. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad. And it's also okay to come and share with your friends and talk about it. And it's okay to talk about emotions. Like, it's okay that, and maybe there's, and I don't want to say it like this, it sounds weird, but maybe it helps us have a more genuine conversation about emotions today, right? This is real. This is real life that we're all experiencing every day. But that masculine structure within me that says, it's okay, I've got you. No matter what, I've got you. And if I don't have you, I have a masculine something inside of me that says, then I'm going to call a friend, and I'm going to give myself an opportunity to cry about it. And I'm going to give myself an opportunity to wail about it if I'm not strong enough. But I trust my inner masculine to meet me in whatever way I need. In the same way that if I'm angry about something, then I also trust my inner masculine is going to step up and make change. And it's going to say, that's enough. This is not going to happen. That allows me, when I know that I have my masculine side to really step up, that's the masculine in all of us that steps up, right? To step up, I'm allowed to actually dive deeper into my anger and understand, holy mackerel, this is a pattern I've repeated 1,000,000 times. This is not just today. This is something I've done 1,000 times. You know what? I have to do this. I have to make change. This ends with me now. This is the balance of the masculine feminine. There's no point feeling the emotions if we don't have this masculine counterpart to support it, right? And it's the same thing with happiness. Like, these are just the negative emotions, but it's the same thing with happiness. There are also things going on in my world right now that fill me with so much joy. Like, that just fill my heart in ways that I just can't even tell you. I'm also allowed to feel that. It's the funny thing about emotions is I think we're meant to embrace the word and instead of or. I can feel grief. I can also feel so incredibly grateful and happy for so many things going on in the world right now. I can feel hope. I can feel sadness. I can feel all the things. It's all good. We really are that multidimensional. We are that big. This is our capacity for living and feeling alive. The other thing about that is that no matter what we're feeling, we actually also, the other piece of this strong masculine within us is that it also means we can still go on. It doesn't break us. It's always so ironic that whenever I teach any kind of retreat or any kind of course about the feminine, we inevitably start teaching about the masculine, because it's that strong masculine inside that actually has been repressed. It's been our freedom and our ability for all genders to be able to act on these feelings, to actually do whatever it is we need to do in response to the world around us. So it's our masculine that's actually been dropped. So, for example, one of the things that really gave me a lot of insight about this repression of the emotions was, I grew up in Toronto. I married a dairy farmer many, many years ago. And dairy farming is really interesting because we were organic, so we grew all of our own feed for the cattle and everything, which most livestock farmers do. But what was really interesting is in harvest time and in planting, you're on a time scale, like you're on a timeline. You are 100% susceptible to the weather. So if the hay is ready to go off and the sun is shining, it doesn't matter what you feel like that day. It doesn't matter if you have a migraine, and I used to migraine out. It doesn't matter how you feel. You have to get out in the field. There is no room for anything. You have to simply do it. It's the same thing as if you have children and the children are teething. You get up whether you're dying or not. This is the way it is. So there are times in our life that it is really important to be able to set aside however we're feeling and show up for whatever it is needs to be shown up for. And this is a really healthy thing. This is called survival. And this is deeply ingrained within us, that there are times in our lives that we simply show up regardless of how we're feeling. But this is not all the time. And this is one of the challenges, that if in our life we're sort of living in this constant turmoil, constant fight or flight, we think that we're not allowed to ever rest and feel our emotions. On the farm, there were only very specific times. There was this 1 week that we had to get the hay off. And as soon as that hay was off, you could collapse, right? This is important to allow for the cycles of life, to allow for things to shift and come out. And then we feel the emotions. And then this is why people, they kind of drive and drive and drive and drive and drive. And then all of a sudden they go on holidays and they get sick for a week because their body finally rested and just released everything that they've been repressing for the year. It's so important to allow for rest, to allow for that downtime. And again, for the masculine to step up and say, you know what? We're not supposed to live in fight or flight all the time. We've got to make some changes right now, right? The only way that we can ever feel that we're in a space that we can actually feel our emotions is when we have our own back and we actually start living. We actually start enjoying life, So another big thing I want to talk about in understanding these feelings. David Bohm is one of my faves, obviously. And he liked to play with language because he believed that our language tripped us up a lot. And one of the things was this idea of feeling and thinking. I might say, I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling mad. I'm feeling something. And he'd always say, are you really feeling it? He said, feeling assumes a present moment emotion. He said, but most people, when they're feeling something, they're actually not feeling something in this moment. They're feeling something that happened 10 years ago. So there was something they felt 10 years ago when this thing happened, or 5 years ago, or yesterday. It was something they felt yesterday. And for whatever reason, they're choosing to continue to feel it today, but they felt it yesterday. He said, so really, they're not feeling it, they're felting it. And so he would use this language and he'd say, well, I'm felting this thing that happened 10 years ago. And there's something really interesting about that in our mind, to understand, to actually tell ourselves, no, this actually, my natural emotional response to this was 10 years ago, or yesterday, or 5 years ago, right? It isn't actually present anymore. This thing isn't still happening. I'm just felting something from my past. And there's something that changes how our brain interprets this line of thinking, that I'm felting this. And it's really powerful. It's really important. It helps us discern something important in our emotions, right? Is this current? How do I really feel today? Right? It's very, very important. And he went also as far as to say the same thing about thinking. He said, oftentimes we think that we're thinking, but we're not thinking. We're actually thoughting. It's like we had a thought a year ago. But what we're doing today is we're repeating the thought. We're just thoughting. We're not actually thinking. Thinking assumes that I'm in the present moment and I'm actually pondering a thought from this moment. I'm pondering an idea. I'm growing. I'm doing something in this moment. I'm thinking. Very seldom are we actually thinking, and very seldom are we actually feeling. Most of what we think is thinking, we're thoughting. And a lot of what we think we're feeling, we're felting. And this alone really clears the deck on a lot of how we interpret our emotions, And when we come into this moment right now, what am I really feeling? And what am I really thinking? This is often quite empty. It's quite clear. But we're in such a habit of thoughting and felting, we think it's all present. So it's just something to just be aware of about our emotions. When we're talking about emotions, what are we really thinking about, or what are we really feeling, or if we're feeling anything at all in this moment, or are we felting? So another kind of emotion I want to talk about is being in a mood. Because sometimes I'm in a sad mood, or I'm in an angry mood. I woke up in a bad mood, or I got home from work and now we generally talk about bad moods, right? So the feminine side of a mood, right, is a vulnerability to feel whatever we're actually feeling, right? Because something's going on, right? A mood is a stuck state. I'm stuck. As humans, we naturally cycle, right? Whether we imagine it like a sine wave, up and down, or a circular, however we imagine it, we're meant to flow, right? We're not living in a time-space continuum just to sit in the same spot, right? For some reason, we're meant to experience the world in motion. So if we're stuck in a mood, something's amok. So the key here is we're going to have to go inside and be vulnerable to whatever emotion it is that we're kind of hiding from ourselves, or something we're afraid to feel. There's something going on. So the feminine part of a mood is to be open to that. The masculine side kind of observes this little soul that's having this mood, having this experience. And the masculine self says, is this mine? Is this my feeling I'm having? And this is where we start asking ourselves, are we empaths? Am I picking up on something from someone else? Is this emotion even mine? But this is our masculine self, right? This is the structure around the chaos that says, what's going on here? And the feminine self responds and says, yes, it is mine. Or, no, it's not mine. Right? But this is the dance of the masculine feminine. The masculine asks a question. The feminine is vulnerable enough to respond. The masculine then says, well, if it's not ours, is there something we're meant to do? And maybe the feminine says, no, we're meant to let it go. Then the masculine says, then we're going to let it go. Or the feminine says, yes, there's something we're supposed to do. And the masculine says, what are we supposed to do? It says, oh, I'm supposed to call my mother. Okay, I'm going to call my mother. Right? There's a dance. There's a reason. There's a point to life. There's a point to every emotion that we have, even if it feels like a crappy mood. Right? Then we have to ask ourselves, if we have prolonged moods, right? If we have something that doesn't go away for whatever reason, then again, our masculine self comes in like a good friend, not like a taskmaster, but like a good friend, and kind of holds some space for us and says, what's going on here? Because a prolonged mood, a prolonged depression, a prolonged whatever, like whenever, we often interpret this as an emotional state, right? But emotion, it like literally, it has the word motion in it. It's meant to be doing this. If we're stuck, what's going on? Because this is no longer an emotion. This is something else. So one of the weird things about our brain, right? We have all of these really functional parts of our brains, that handle voice and hearing and movement and all these things, and touch and feeling and all this. But then we have this interesting prefrontal cortex up here. This develops when we're about 8-9 years old. And this allows us to have abstract thought. This is why you can say to an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child, okay, in 4 hours, we're going to have dinner. And the child can go, 4 hours. And it can kind of create a map in its mind of, oh, okay, we can do this and this and this. Whereas if you say that to a 6-year-old, they're like, you can't, the 6-year-old doesn't have this part of the brain yet. It can't create this ability of imagining space and time in a different way. There's something funny that happens in our prefrontal cortex, that when we have an experience or we have an issue or we have something happen that we can't solve, a weird thought loop forms up here. A story is created, a memory is harvested, something. And in that thought loop, there are feelings attached. So these would be the thoughtings and the feltings. But this story starts to loop in our brain. It starts to loop in this prefrontal cortex. And all of a sudden, we are experiencing something over and over and over again in a loop that's not present. It's just this loop. And these thoughts create the structure of a whole different reality. And there's all these emotions attached to those thoughts. And this is where it's really interesting. And again, this is where that masculine, that structure comes out. And we look at ourselves in kindness and we say, what's the loop? What's going on? What's the story I'm telling myself over and over again? What's the story I'm telling everyone else over and over again? What's going on? What's the loop? Because this is no longer an emotion. This is a circular state that's all living up here, right? And that's interesting to discern that from an actual emotion. Because if it's just an emotion, they just have to get it out. But this is something that we actually have to kind of hack into the hack and say, no, you're not going to loop me anymore. You're not going to just keep, because if we have this intellectual loop going, our bodies don't know the difference, and it keeps responding to this thing. It's kind of like, in the land of, I wish I'd never watched the movie Jaws, right? I watched Jaws when I was I think it came out when I was 9 years old, and I watched it in a drive-in theater. I don't know whether it was being played while my prefrontal cortex was learning about fantasy and imagining terrible things and all these kind of things. But I take one step into the ocean and that movie starts to play in my mind. There's nothing going on. The chance of me being attacked by a shark is pretty minimal, but it doesn't matter. Because that story is so deeply ingrained in my brain, it is now playing out as if it's happening. And we do this with all kinds of things in life. We replay, well, there was that moment when this person did this thing, and now we just cycle, and all the emotions keep us there. So it's just really important to note that that's a different thing than an emotion as a response to something that's actually happening in this moment. It's just again, it's just part of my system of understanding our various emotional responses to things. Another really important piece of emotional response is our emotions are also how we know our truth. Our emotions are so important. So back in 1999, when I was sick, and for anyone who's new, I had breast lumps, and a teacher appeared in my life. My mom had just died of breast cancer, and it's a big, long story, but a teacher appeared in my life, and he said, Katrina, you have got to start telling the truth. And I'm like, I always tell the truth. I said, I never lie to anybody. And he goes, you're not telling the truth to you. You're not lying to anyone else because you're telling everyone the truth that you're telling yourself, which isn't true. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, no idea what you're talking about. And he said, okay, whenever anyone asks you a question, I want you to listen to your heart And if at whatever the response is to their question is, if your heart rises, it's a yes. And if your heart falls, it's a no. And I was like, what? Anyway, sure enough, someone, my mother-in-law would call and say, oh, well, do you guys want to come up for dinner? And sometimes the answer was like, ugh. My answer was no, right? But then, of course, whatever I needed to be the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect mother, the perfect, mother of her grandchildren, blah, 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 blah. And so I would say, sure, can I bring anything? Right? So you can feel this like, this huge separation between my truth and the reality I was living, Or it could be something completely different where a friend calls and she's like, oh my God, you want to go away for the weekend? And I'm like, oh, yes. But I can't because this and this is happening. So I can't, right? And this was my life. I almost never was actually in line with my heart's truth, my soul's truth. I was living according to a persona that I was trying to live up to, that I wanted everyone else to think, that I wanted to think about me, but I wasn't being honest myself. And this emotional response, this is an emotional response. This yes, no has also been repressed. It's the same function as why have we been taught to repress anger? Why have we been repressed why have we been taught to repress sadness? Why have we been told to repress even happiness if someone else is sad? We've been taught to repress this, but by repressing all these other emotions, we're also repressing this very basic happy, sad response, which means we are repressing our own truth. And therefore, we don't know what our own genuine path is because we're so disconnected from our emotions. So very often, the idea of following this positive, negative, happy, sad, yes, no, answer, this binary decision-making ability we have inside, this is really, really, really important. But again, the only way for us to do this is to have this interesting masculine framework. So in order to be able to do this yes, no thing inside of me, I had to back up and look at the philosophy that was living in my mind. And I had to ask myself, well, what's the philosophy that's holding me in this pattern? Right? So then my brain has to go away and it has to go, you believe that you can't disappoint anyone. That if you disappoint someone, there's something wrong with you. That people won't like you. That you will be that their disappointment somehow defines you in some way. That's interesting. Well, how could we turn that around? Like you can feel how kind of masculine structural logic pattern looking this is, right? So different than that emotional response. And so then looking at all the patterns, it's like, yes, I've seen this in my family before. Yes, this is actually connected to the breast cancer and the women in my family. Yes, this is very important. I should shift this. Right? But I'm shifting it in my masculine side. I'm shifting it in my philosophy of the world side. And I'm realizing that, you know what? The best thing that I can offer anyone is my genuine self, who I really am. This is what's really important, right? Who is Katrina actually? Really, the soul Katrina, not the persona Katrina, not the person everyone, that makes their life easier Katrina, but actually the genuine fire inside, the genuine passion and love inside. Who's that? And the philosophy became, that's who I meant to share. That's actually the best way. Even if I go into the who am I meant to serve and all that kind of thing, that's actually the best way to serve. Nice, right? So now I have this beautiful philosophy, this beautiful container that when the phone, here's me, right? This is how old, this is in 1999 before we had cell phones. And when the phone rings and someone says, Katrina, do you want to do this? This beautiful masculine container gives me the strength to say, no, that doesn't seem right today. Well, how come? I don't know. Just doesn't seem right today. And I hang up the phone and I go on with my day. Right? So it's so beautiful, this balance of the masculine and feminine to say, no, yes, no, these are important emotional responses, right? The other interesting thing about this yes, no, because sometimes we can have fears that rise up, right? It's like, if I say yes to something and it's like, I can't believe I just said yes to that. Like, what am I thinking, right? Like, years ago, I was on Facebook and a friend of mine posted that she was going to do a Tough Mudder. And a Tough Mudder, if you don't know, is a brutal race. It's an obstacle race, but it's like 16 kilometers, 25 obstacles that are really hard, like jumping into ice water and crawling underground and jumping over fire, and like it's scary and hard and it requires incredible physical strength. And you run up and down this ski hill 6 times, which I didn't know before I did it. Anyway, and athletics isn't really my thing, but it was so weird. I read the thing that she was doing it and she was putting together a team, and my heart went, oh, like this. And I'm literally, my head's going, are you kidding? A Tough Mudder? You can't even run 5K. Like, what are you talking about doing a Tough Mudder? I have the upper body strength of a T-Rex. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this isn't possible. Anyway, and I was but I heard my heart rise and I went, what does this mean? Right? And then, of course, the next day, the same friend texted me and said, hey, Katrina, I'd love for you to be on this team with us. And I was like, and of course, my little heart went, you know what the answer is? And I was like, that would be awesome. Thanks for asking. But the cool thing is, I also had this belief system that said, if the answer is yes, there must be a good reason for it. I trust this. So I began training. And it was the middle of winter, and it was a really cold winter. It was like one of these winters that it was like -30, -40 every day for like 2 months. But I just trained and I did the thing, and I did the Tough Mudder, and I completed it uninjured. That was my whole goal, was just to complete it uninjured. And I don't know all the reasons why I did it, but I know for me personally, it was just as I was separated from my husband, and there was a lot of emotions. We were married for 20 years. It was a sad ending. Well, and amicable, but sad. And I realized later that the Tough Mudder was so hard. Like it was so incredibly hard. It was like I got rid of every emotional bit of baggage that I had accumulated in the 20 years on the farm. Like everything was left on that mountain. And when I was finished, I was quite a zombie. There wasn't much left of me, emotionally, physically, anything. I was literally a zombie. But I was different. It was almost like some bizarre spirit quest. And I really trust that. So I really trust my yeses and my nos. I trust that in always. Because I have this masculine self that knows to trust it. So it almost becomes a fearless thing, that it's okay to trust the mystery. It's okay to trust the potential chaos, because I so know that I'm held and all will be well in the end. So it's a really interesting thing in order to really, really, really feel our emotions. To really look at that beautiful masculine side of all of it that allows us to dive deep, that allows us to honor the yes, no, that allows us to objectively and with love look at the cycles and the moods we may fall into. So I think it's kind of ironic that it's actually a structural piece that helps us really feel our emotions. I'm going to put my glasses on. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. Is ambivalence real? I think so. I think ambivalence, it's different. Like in David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, he talks about the difference between apathy and neutrality. And apathy is a response of fear almost, right? It's something that, I can't handle anything, so I'm just going to shut down all my emotions and feel nothing intentionally. That's apathy. That's I refuse to feel emotions at all, which you're kind of not living anymore. And then as you kind of climb through the ranks, through the power, I did a whole pile of talks about this, about all the different levels of consciousness, and they're all here on Insight Timer. There's one about apathy too. And then there's one about neutrality. And neutrality is true ambivalence. When something happens and you go, But for me, I feel ambivalence the most when whatever's going on actually isn't my story. I'm not meant to respond to it. Even though it could be a super loaded story, super sad, super brutal story. But for whatever reason, I don't have a response because it isn't for me. It's for someone else. And that's okay, right? That's okay. Is that why Kundalini Yoga is so annoying? It's a bizarre spirit quest and you're not the same afterwards. That's exactly what Kundalini Yoga is. It is. In our yoga teacher training, someone asked, why there's so many arms in it, right? Why are our arms always up? Because it's annoying and it drives us crazy. It doesn't hurt us, but it stimulates anything that's locked up and stuck, which of course is the point of Kundalini Yoga, is to heal our emotions and release the blocks in our chakras so the Kundalini can rise. But sometimes we need to be pressured, and so what better place than to do it on the mat, right? Can I recommend simple steps for reacquainting our feminine and masculine sides, re-engaging the connection after it's been shut down? To me, it begins with the feminine. It begins with listening. And I think that's why Jim, who was my teacher, said to listen to this very subtle yes-no inside. It's just this one thing. And then all of a sudden, you go to work and someone says something and you feel this rise or fall, and that's the start point, right? And you go, oh, that's interesting. And that's where you start to unfurl it, right? That's when you start to go, okay, wait a minute. I'm going to go against my truth now. Why is that? And then we pop over to the masculine. We say, why is that? Because again, sometimes this masculine is an unhealthy masculine, right? It's the unhealthy masculine because the masculine is berating, or it's controlling, or it's criticism, right? So the feminine feels something and says, oh, for God's sake, get over it. Put your big girl panties on. Arr! That's not masculine. That's criticism. That's meanness. That's something else. So then all of a sudden we look at that and we go, hey, wait a minute. I need to get a healthier masculine. You're supposed to hold space for me. You're not supposed to beat the crap out of me, And that's the beginning. But it always begins with the feminine. and then we can build from there. I feel like I'm tugged on in so many directions and can't even feel it in my body. I'm so disconnected. It takes a real concerted effort to tune in. For sure. The other beautiful thing, I don't know if it's beautiful, but when we become really disconnected from our body will often speak to us in pain, right? This is where, when we learn about the body-mind connection, when we have specific ailments, if we have specific diseases or we have pain in the body. This is why, Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, became so popular, because we are so disconnected. We can't listen anymore. So then our body has to yell at us, and again, not to like draw, a great big wide brush about that, but to be able to go, okay, you know what? I'm so disconnected. I'm going to look for clues. And then you say, okay, I have this pain in my body. I have this illness in my body. Okay, what can it mean? What chakra is it related to? What emotions are part of the chakras? What time of our life did that happen? Whatever. And that begins the journey of going inward and reconnecting with self. How do we redevelop a healthy masculine? I've lost the supportive element of it. Now I don't trust its abusiveness, judgment. It's a great question. It's funny. This is a huge passion of mine. This is one of the books I'm writing right now, is about the masculine and feminine. And I have a lot of courses about it. So imagine the masculine always acts upon the feminine with the intention of growth for all beings. So if the feminine is, if a friend is hurting, they're in a very vulnerable state. So the masculine comes along and becomes the shoulder to cry on, right? It becomes this beautiful stability. So if the pattern in your life has been that person that comes in to help tries to fix you, and you're like, I don't want to be fixed, then we adjust. We kind of allow that witness mind to watch and say, what would I love right now? I would just like someone to be silent and hold me while I cry. That's what I would like. It's almost like we just have to learn along the way, because in the same way that we struggle to even have healthy feminine, we also struggle to have healthy masculine. And we're all really learning. Can I talk about abuse confusing us and understanding our own body signs, not knowing what I'm feeling, tired of living like a zombie? Yeah, abuse is interesting. It's almost like we have to find a new center. Yesterday, in the Radiant Sutras, I did a meditation. The sutra we read was all about remembering a memory, a powerful, joyful memory. And so we did a meditation, and the meditation turned out really lovely. So I actually edited it and uploaded it to Insight Timer. So in a couple of days, it will be live on Insight Timer. And I recommend things like that. It's almost like sometimes when we've come out of abuse and we've come out of trauma, it's hard to find our way out of that. And so we have to find, there's places to kind of release certain things out of it, release some emotional responses and all that kind of thing, and heal some things. But then in many ways, we almost have to create a new fire inside of us. It's like we have to rediscover our own soul. And we do that even through things like meditation, finding that deep center, reconnecting with our truth, reconnecting with who we are. And we stoke this fire. Even though out here there might be this horrible thing and this response and trauma and all that, but we also are building a new fire over here. It's almost like, imagine there's a house that you've lived in, and it's full of horrible memories, and every time you walk down this hallway you flinch and you remember this thing, and whether it's a physical house or it's just a place in our mind. And then you decide one day, you know what, I'm going to build a brand new little cabin just for me out in the woods. And it's just a brand new cabin. And you have a nice little candle in it, and you have your favorite rug and your favorite blanket and your favorite 3 books. And you just go there on weekends, maybe on Sunday, you go to your little cabin and you rest in this lovely space that's 100% you. right? And then bit by bit, you go, you know what, I'm just going to go to the cabin on Tuesday night as well. Just going to, escape, and go to the cabin. And then bit by bit, you start moving more of your belongings there and more of your belongings there and more of your belongings there until eventually that's where you live. And you genuinely live there. You're not escaping. You genuinely, slowly have built that up to be a new home. And it's a gentle process. It's not I'm just going to go there. You just do these tiny things. So it might just be 5 minutes of meditation every day with a candle and a bit of incense and some quiet music that you say, you know what, for 5 minutes, I'm going to just be with me. And you just slowly, organically build self again. Yeah, getting out of fight or flight is such an important thing. And sometimes, again, it's even mentally, it just depends on how you're wired, to simply actually ask ourselves, right now, what is happening? Again, it's sort of that felting, feeling, thoughting, thinking thing, right? What's happening right now? Always coming back into the moment. There's like the whole study of mindfulness in Buddhism, or this perpetual come back to the moment, come back to the moment. It's not just an idea to bring us peaceful thoughts and things like that. It's really, really valuable healing work to come back into this moment, be mindful of this moment, just live here, just live here, just live here, until we only live here, right? It is a discipline. It is a learning to stay here. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you soon.